I want to talk about why I started this channel and a question I get pretty often, which is you don't talk about being disabled or immunocompromised on your channel. Most people I know in that situation never pay that close attention, or definitely at this point are not talking about COVID, are not paying attention to long-term impacts. Why are you doing this? Like, where does this come from? And for me, there's two primary reasons, and both were actually very early on in the pandemic. The first was that I have a family member or friend, someone close to me, who's moderately immunocompromised. They take medicine that suppresses their immune system, and it was pretty clear early on that they would be someone who'd be at higher risk than most people, although all of us were at risk still, but especially in the early days of the pandemic, before the vaccine, before we really knew what COVID was doing. So that person in my life was reading and educating themselves on how to stay safe. I was trying to protect myself, so I wanted to be very informed, and there was someone near to me that I wanted to protect as well. I think the difference between myself and most people came from following information on COVID Twitter very carefully. So I wanted to learn as much as possible about how to protect myself, how does COVID spread, what are the symptoms, how are ways to avoid it, how are ways to know if you have it or not. I wanted to understand what was going on. And very early on, it became extremely clear to many people who were paying attention that the government response was completely botched. They were making certain statements about things that didn't make sense, or we later found out they were completely wrong about. And on the flip side, there were experts in various fields who were trying to yell from the rooftops, hey, this is getting botched, here's what's really going on. I'm going to do a whole video on this topic, but the World Health Organization, for example, was pushing this idea that COVID was not airborne, which is absolutely wrong. So they tweeted, fact, COVID-19 is not airborne. The coronavirus is mainly transmitted through droplets generated when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or speaks. None of that is true. And if you get it wrong or lie about how COVID spreads, then the measures to avoid it are not going to be that effective. I never even noticed how weird this one, wash or rub your hands. I've never heard of rubbing your hands being super helpful. This is spreading misinformation, and it's not telling you the key thing you need to know, which is COVID is airborne. You can breathe it in. You need to not breathe in shared air or wear a mask. In February 2020, the CDC says, the CDC does not currently recommend the use of face masks to help prevent novel coronavirus. So this is probably the most helpful thing people could have done, and they were explicitly told not to use it. They didn't provide studies behind this. They just said, don't use masks, and it didn't make a lot of sense. The theory here is that they were worried that healthcare workers wouldn't be able to get the masks, so they decided to lie to everyone and hampered their own ability to respond to the pandemic, damaging trust very severely. And so in these two examples, we just see them saying things that are wrong. They're presenting it with certainty. They're not explaining why. They're not giving good evidence. And experts knew that this was clearly wrong. In 2004, we already had evidence that SARS-1 was airborne, so how is it impossible that SARS-2 was airborne? And this 2018 study found that influenza could be spread through the airborne infection route. And then I also saw experts interpreting early medical research we were seeing in early studies of COVID patients and coming up with some alarming predictions. So for example, AJ Leonardi did his PhD on T-cell differentiation. And based on some early results, he saw that the CD8 T cells, those are our killer T cells that kill infected cells, were not effectively clearing the virus. And he said, this is April 2020. There will be sustained viral reservoirs if what he was seeing was happening. And we now know in 2024, it's extremely well agreed upon that viral reservoirs, persistent infections is one of the main causes of long COVID. So he's seeing in real time, making predictions that later came true. I'll show you another one. In July 2020, based on what he'd seen on people getting reinfected, results of T-cell studies, he said the hope of herd immunity via infection with this virus is a self-defeating one. More infections will accelerate mutations, allowing escape from immune memory. Anticipate seasonal infection. Seasonal SARS, imagine that. And he said the virus deletes T cells, will chip away our immune memory. And this is exactly what we're seeing. Herd immunity failed dramatically. It never worked. It was a horrible idea. Remember, the idea was you get COVID once and you're done with it. And instead, people are getting COVID multiple times repeatedly. So I wanted to protect myself. I wanted to protect people around me. I saw the government saying things that were not true, telling people it wasn't airborne and don't wear a mask. So I realized it was on myself to become educated, try and learn which experts were telling the truth and actually had studies and science behind what they were saying, and which experts were lying or just towing the official government line. And once you know that everyone is being misled and you're starting to see what the truth is, it's very hard to watch everyone else be kind of let off a cliff, in my opinion. And on top of that, people didn't want to hear the truth. You could send them studies, you could send them articles. It was what I call the unholy trinity. The average person, government, and business all united around this myth that COVID was mild. Once the vaccine came out, everything was fine. And I understand people were traumatized. They had loved ones die. They had new health conditions. They wanted to get back to normal so desperately. But as they were getting more and more tuned out and believing lies, I was learning more and more and more about what COVID was doing to blood vessels, what it was doing to our brain, what it was doing to our immune system. So I was becoming more and more concerned as the people around me were becoming less and less concerned. So what choice did I have? I could try and ignore all the things I learned, but that wasn't really going to be satisfying. I had a personal Instagram account, and I would share things here and there, and I just got crickets in return, and I felt uncomfortable. I felt like I was imposing on other people because I was ruining the illusion that they wanted, and it was just very uncomfortable for all of us. So I came to TikTok, and this channel has become one of the most meaningful things in my life because it makes me feel a lot less alone. It makes me feel like I can share some information that I've got in an accessible way, and a lot of people send me messages that they've started wearing a mask again, or they've gotten their booster because they hadn't been thinking about it. So I'm just really appreciative of all the people that interact with my stuff, that share it, and just I think we're all helping each other to know that we're not alone. We are looking at things reasonably, and we got to come together and continue to talk about this. Nothing's going to change until public consciousness starts to change. I think it comes from us continuing to hold firm in what we know is true and starting to model what does a new normal look like. Stay tuned for more stuff on that, and as always, thanks for watching.